Blood stained the wooden floorboards of Dusty Creek Saloon, but it wasn't from a gunfight, it was from Zara Valentine's broken heart, manifesting as tears that dripped from her chin while jeers echoed around her. The year was 1875, and Wyoming Territory had little patience for a woman who just discovered her fiancé had run off with all her savings and the deed to her late father's ranch. The laughter of the patrons sliced through her like knives as she clutched the fraudulent marriage license in her trembling hands. "Looks like Prescott took another fool for all she's worth," hollered a red-faced miner, slapping his knee. "How many times we gotta tell you ladies? Men only want one thing in these parts, and it ain't your cookin'," added another, triggering another round of cruel laughter. Zara's shoulders shook with silent sobs. At 22, she'd lost everything her father to consumption 6 months prior, and now her home and future to a silver-tongued swindler. The humiliation burned worse than the whiskey they'd offered her as mock consolation. From the corner of the saloon, a tall figure rose. Yates Remington had been nursing his bourbon, observing the scene with growing disgust. At 26, he'd seen his share of cruelty in this unforgiving territory, but something about the young woman's dignified bearing, even in devastation, stirred something long dormant in him. "That's enough," his deep voice cut through the din, silencing the room. The piano player's fingers froze mid-chord. "This lady deserves your respect, not your mockery." "And what's it to you, Remington?" challenged Silas Werner, the saloon owner's son who'd been laughing the loudest. "She ain't nothin' to nobody now." Yates stepped forward, his spurs jingling with each deliberate step as he crossed the room. His weathered Stetson cast a shadow over piercing blue eyes that had stared down outlaws and renegades across 3 territories. He stopped beside Zara, whose tear-streaked face lifted in confusion at this unexpected intervention. Without taking his eyes off the now silent crowd, Yates spoke with quiet certainty. "She's my future wife." The declaration hung in the stale air. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she looked up at this stranger tall as a pine tree, with a face hardened by sun and hardship, yet his eyes held something she hadn't seen in this town before: decency. "I don't even know you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Name's Yates Remington, madam," he replied, loud enough for all to hear. "And I reckon that's a situation we can remedy starting right now." Silas stepped forward, hand hovering near his holster. "You gone soft in the head, Remington? Or you just take pity on every pretty face that comes crying through those doors?" "I recognize a woman of worth when I see one," Yates replied evenly. "Something you wouldn't understand, Silas." The tension crackled between them like lightning before a storm. Zara stood, her legs unsteady but her chin raised with newfound resolve. "Mr. Remington," she said, her voice gaining strength, "I appreciate your kindness, but I don't need saving through false proposals." "Nothing false about it," Yates countered, his eyes never leaving hers now. "But we can discuss the particulars in private, away from this audience of vultures." He offered his arm, a gentleman's gesture that seemed out of place on a man whose calloused hands spoke of hard labor and harder living. After a moment's hesitation, Zara placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength beneath his worn denim shirt. "This ain't over, Remington," Silas called as they walked toward the door. Yates paused, turning slightly. "It is for tonight." Outside, the April evening air carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Stars punctured the vast Wyoming sky like silver pinpricks in dark velvet. Only then did Zara realize she was still clutching the stranger's arm, as if it were the only solid thing in a world gone liquid with uncertainty. "Why did you do that?" she asked, stepping back to regard him properly in the light spilling from the saloon windows. "Because no one deserves to be beaten while they're down," he answered simply. "And because I've seen what Prescott does to women like you. He's left a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts from here to Santa Fe." "You know him," Zara's voice sharpened. "Know of him. Been tracking him for taking my cousin for everything she had 2 years back." Yates adjusted his hat. Where are you staying? The question brought fresh tears to Zara's eyes. I've been at the boarding house, but my last dollar went to a telegram that never got a response. Yates nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Hargrove's place has a spare room above her bakery. She owes me a favor. You can stay there tonight and we'll figure things out come morning. And this proposal? Zara asked, caution returning to her voice. Just words to shut them up, he admitted, then added with unexpected gentleness, but I meant what I said about you having worth. Whatever Prescott took from you doesn't change that. Something loosened in Zara's chest, not quite hope, but perhaps its shy precursor. I need to get my father's ranch back. It's all I have left of him. Then that's what we'll do, Yates said with such simple conviction that for a moment she almost believed it possible. As they walked through the dusty street toward the bakery, Zara studied her unlikely champion from the corner of her eye. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, yet there was nothing boastful in his manner. What do you do, Mr. Remington? She asked. Bit of this, bit of that. Worked cattle drives, did some scouting for the army. These days I hunt bounties when the law needs extra hands. He glanced down at her. And it's Yates, Zara, she offered in return. Zara Valentine. Well, Miss Valentine, he said as they approached the warm glow of the bakery's windows, I reckon we've got ourselves an arrangement of convenience. You need somewhere safe to land, and I've been looking for Prescott long enough to know 2 heads are better than 1. And the wife part. She couldn't help asking. A hint of a smile touched his lips for the first time. Let's call that an exaggeration for dramatic effect, though if you want to keep those vultures at bay, it might not hurt to let them think there's some truth to it. As Mrs. Hargrove fussed over her unexpected lodger and Yates took his leave with a promise to return at first light, Zara found herself wondering if fate had finally dealt her a kind hand in the form of this solemn-eyed stranger. Or was he just another man with motives yet to be revealed? Either way, tomorrow would bring its own truths. Tonight, she had shelter, and for the first time since discovering Prescott's betrayal, she had something else too, a flicker of purpose to replace the hollow ache of humiliation. Morning arrived with the smell of fresh bread and Mrs. Hargrove's cheerful humming. Zara had slept fitfully, dreams of her father's disappointed face mingling with the stranger's unexpected kindness. She dressed in her only remaining decent outfit, a simple blue calico dress that had seen better days, and pinned her dark hair into a practical knot at the nape of her neck. Just as Mrs. Hargrove was pressing a warm roll into her hands, a knock came at the back door. Yates stood there, hat in hand, looking as if he'd already put in half a day's work. The morning light revealed details she'd missed in the evening shadows. A thin scar that traced his jaw, the gold flecks in his otherwise slate blue eyes, and the careful way he kept his distance, respecting her space. Thought we might start at the land office, he said without preamble. See exactly what Prescott did with that deed. I'll need to visit the bank first, Zara replied. I have questions about how he was able to access my father's accounts. Mrs. Hargrove watched this exchange with undisguised interest. So it's true what they're saying in town. You two are to be married. Zara opened her mouth to correct this misunderstanding, but Yates spoke first. We're taking things one step at a time, Mrs. Hargrove, he said diplomatically. Miss Valentine has had a difficult time of late. The baker patted Zara's hand. Well, I think it's wonderful. A woman needs protection in these parts, especially one as pretty as you. Rather than feeling patronized, Zara recognized the genuine concern beneath the woman's words. This territory was unkind to women without connections. Thank you for your hospitality, she said sincerely. I won't forget it. Outside, the morning bustle of Rattlesnake Gulch, a name at odds with the town's recent attempts at respectability, was well underway. Freight wagons rumbled past, shopkeepers swept their boardwalks, and the smell of wood smoke hung in the air. You didn't correct her, Zara noted as they walked. Seemed easier not to, Yates replied. Besides, word travels fast in towns like this. If people think you're spoken for, you'll face fewer unwanted advances. Is that what this is about, your protection? There was a hint of challenge in her voice. Yates stopped walking and turned to face her. Miss Valentine, I have no designs on you beyond helping you recover what's rightfully yours. My mother raised me to believe that when you see someone in trouble, you help them if you can. It's as simple as that. The directness of his gaze made it difficult to doubt him. I've learned the hard way that nothing is ever that simple with men. Fair enough, he conceded. But I reckon actions speak louder than words. Judge me by what I do, not what others have done. The bank manager, a portly man named Wilbur Thornton, received them with visible discomfort, his eyes darting between Zara and the ledger before him. I'm afraid everything was in order, Miss Valentine, he explained, tugging at his collar. Mr. Prescott presented the marriage certificate and the amended deed with both your signatures. By law, a husband has rights to his wife's property. But we weren't actually married, Zara said through gritted teeth. The certificate was forged. That would be a matter for the marshal, Thornton deflected. As far as the bank is concerned, the papers were properly notarized. By whom? Yates asked sharply. Thornton consulted the documents. A justice of the peace named Samuel Blackwater from over in Cripple Creek. There's no justice by that name in Cripple Creek, Yates said with certainty. I was there 3 weeks back. Thornton's face paled slightly. Are you suggesting the documents are fraudulent? I'm stating it plainly, Zara interjected, finding her voice. Thomas Prescott swindled me, and either you were too incompetent to notice, or you were complicit. The accusation hung in the air like gunsmoke. Thornton sputtered indignantly, but Yates pressed the advantage. Where did Prescott take the money? Was it a draft or gold? A banker's draft, Thornton admitted, drawn on our Denver correspondent bank. Then it can be traced, Yates concluded, and stopped if it hasn't been cashed yet. I cannot simply. You can and you will, Yates cut him off. Unless you'd prefer to explain to Marshal Fitzgerald why you accepted suspicious documents without proper verification. Something in Yates's tone suggested he and the marshal had an understanding, a hint of authority that made Thornton reconsider his position. I'll send a wire immediately, the banker conceded, but I make no promises. As they left the bank, Zara felt the first stirrings of genuine hope. How did you know about Cripple Creek? Been moving around these territories for the better part of a decade, Yates explained. You learn the lay of the land, who's who and where, useful in my line of work. And what exactly is your line of work? She pressed. You mentioned bounties, but there seems to be more. Yates was quiet for a moment as they walked toward the land office. I was a deputy marshal for a time, gave it up after a situation went bad. Now I take contracts to find people who need finding, sometimes for the law, sometimes for families. And Prescott, is he just another contract to you? He started that way, Yates admitted. But it became personal after what happened to my cousin Louisa. She was a widow with a small inheritance. Prescott courted her, married her, and disappeared with everything within a month. What happened to her? Zara asked softly. She's back with her parents in Kansas now, he said, a shadow crossing his face. But she was never the same, lost her spirit. They reached the land office, a small building with meticulously organized shelves of leather-bound records. The clerk, a young man with ink-stained fingers, was considerably more helpful than the banker. These amendments were filed just last week, he explained, showing them the deed to the Valentine Ranch, but there's something odd about them. What's that? Yates asked. The notary seal, it's the right design, but the impression is too shallow, like it was made with a forgery rather than the original stamp. The clerk lowered his voice. I noticed it, but Mr. Prescott had a letter from Judge Wilson vouching for him. May we see this letter? Zara asked. The clerk hesitated. It's not in the file. Mr. Prescott took it with him after I recorded the deed. Convenient, Yates remarked dryly. And would you recognize this seal if you saw it again? Absolutely. Each notary has a distinctive pattern. Make us a copy of these documents, Yates instructed. We're going to need evidence. As they left with the copied papers, Zara noticed a familiar figure watching them from across the street. Silas Werner's eyes narrowed with undisguised hostility. "We're being watched," she murmured. "Been aware of that since we left the bakery," Yates replied without turning his head. Silas fancies himself Prescott's friend, probably hoping to curry favor if Prescott returns. "Do you think they're working together?" "It's possible. This town has its share of men who prey on newcomers, especially women traveling alone." He guided her toward the telegraph office. "We need to send some wires. One to the real justice in Cripple Creek, and one to a friend of mine in Denver who can check on that banker's draft." Inside the telegraph office, Zara watched as Yates composed concise messages requesting information. His handwriting was surprisingly neat, each letter formed with deliberate care. "Where did you learn to write like that?" she asked as he handed the messages to the operator. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father," he explained. "She made sure all her children could read and write properly, even after we moved to a ranch where such things weren't common. She sounds remarkable." "She was," he said simply, and the past tense told Zara all she needed to know. They spent the rest of the morning gathering information, visiting the hotel where Prescott had stayed, speaking with the stagecoach office about recent departures, and finally stopping at the marshal's office. Marshal Fitzgerald was a grizzled veteran of both the Civil War and the frontier, with a skeptical squint that softened somewhat at the sight of Yates. "Remington," he acknowledged. "Heard you were back in town. Also heard you've taken a wife." "Not exactly," Yates clarified, explaining their situation while Zara provided the documentation they'd gathered. The marshal studied the papers with a practiced eye. "This is Prescott's work, all right. We've had reports from 3 counties about his schemes. Always targets women with property, always disappears before the law catches up." "Will you help us?" Zara asked directly. Fitzgerald sighed. "I can put out bulletins, but my jurisdiction ends at the county line. If he's headed to Denver, as you suspect, he's beyond my reach." "Then we'll go after him ourselves," Zara declared, surprising both men with her determination. "Miss Valentine," the marshal began cautiously, "that's not advisable for a woman alone." "She won't be alone," Yates interjected. "I'm going with her." The marshal raised an eyebrow. "So there is something to these rumors." "There's justice to be done," Yates corrected him, "and a debt I owe my family." After they left the marshal's office, Zara turned to Yates with renewed purpose. "When do we leave?" "First light tomorrow," he replied. "The Denver stage departs at 6. We'll need supplies and proper gear for the journey." As they walked toward the general store, Zara was acutely aware of the glances and whispers that followed them. In less than a day, their supposed engagement had become the talk of Rattlesnake Gulch. "This ruse of ours seems to have taken on a life of its own," she observed. "Small towns run on gossip," Yates replied with a shrug. "It'll protect you while we're traveling. An unmarried woman journeying with a man would raise questions and invite trouble." "And what about after?" she asked quietly. "After we find Prescott and hopefully recover my property." "What then?" Yates stopped walking and faced her, his expression thoughtful. "Then you'll be free to live your life as you choose, without obligations to me or anyone else." The simplicity of his answer was somehow both reassuring and oddly disappointing, though Zara couldn't explain why the latter should be true. "And what will you do?" she found herself asking. "Continue my work, I suppose. There's always someone needing to be found." There was a weariness in his voice that suggested the endless pursuit of others had taken its toll. "Doesn't sound like much of a life," she observed. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Says the woman determined to live alone on a remote ranch." The observation caught her off guard. "It was my father's dream." "And is it yours?" he asked with genuine curiosity. No one had ever asked her that before. The ranch had always been presented as her inheritance, her responsibility, her future, but had she ever chosen it for herself? "I don't know," she admitted finally. But I do know I won't let someone steal it from me without a fight. Yates nodded with what might have been approval. Then let's make sure you get the chance to decide for yourself. The general store was busy with the usual afternoon trade. As they entered, conversations paused, eyes following their progress. Zara straightened her spine, determined not to show any weakness before these people who had laughed at her tears just yesterday. Mr. Hollister, the storekeeper, greeted them with newfound deference. Mr. Remington, Miss Valentine, or should I say Mrs. Remington to be, congratulations on your engagement. Before Zara could correct him, Yates placed a gentle hand at the small of her back. Thank you, Mr. Hollister. We'll need supplies for the journey to Denver. 2 bedrolls, provisions for a week, and he glanced at Zara's worn boots, a pair of sturdy boots for the lady. Certainly, certainly, Hollister beamed, already pulling items from his shelves. I can't afford all this, Zara whispered urgently. Consider it an investment in catching Prescott, Yates replied quietly. We'll settle accounts later. The way he said it without expectation or condition made Zara realize how accustomed she'd become to men who always wanted something in return. Her father had been the exception, and now, perhaps, this stranger who wasn't really her fiancé. As Hollister wrapped their purchases, the bell above the door jingled. Silas Werner entered, flanked by 2 men whose rough appearance suggested they were more accustomed to breaking laws than upholding them. Well, if it isn't the happy couple, Silas drawled, blocking their path to the door. Planning a trip, are we? Our plans aren't your concern, Werner, Yates replied evenly. Might be if you're chasing after my business partner. Silas's smile didn't reach his eyes. Tom Prescott and I have arrangements that don't include you interfering, so they were connected. Zara felt a chill run down her spine as the pieces fell into place. You helped him target me, didn't you? Told him about my father's ranch, about me being alone. Silas gave a mocking bow. Smart girl. Too bad that intelligence didn't extend to seeing through Tom's charms. Yates's hand moved imperceptibly closer to his holstered revolver. Step aside, Silas. Whatever scheme you and Prescott cooked up, it's finished. I don't think so, Silas countered. In fact, I think you and your fiancé might want to reconsider this journey. Denver can be dangerous this time of year. The threat hung in the air like the blade of a guillotine. Mr. Hollister had retreated behind his counter, and the few other customers were edging toward the door. Is that a threat? Yates asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Call it friendly advice, Silas replied. Pretty lady like her should stay put, maybe consider a more suitable match. His eyes raked over Zara in a way that made her skin crawl. I've always had a soft spot for dark-haired women. That's enough, Zara snapped, surprising herself with her own vehemence. Mr. Werner, whatever arrangement you had with Prescott is irrelevant. He stole my property through fraud, and I intend to recover it. Your advice is neither needed nor welcome. Silas's face darkened. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. Might be fun to break it. In a fluid motion, almost too fast to follow, Yates had Silas by the collar, pressing him against the nearest shelf. Glass bottles rattled precariously as the 2 men glared at each other. Threaten her again, Yates said with lethal quietness, and our next conversation won't happen with words. Silas's companions reached for their weapons, but Yates's reputation evidently preceded him. They hesitated, clearly uncertain about their odds. You're making a mistake, Remington, Silas growled. Tom's got friends in Denver, powerful friends. So do I, Yates replied, releasing him with a slight shove. Tell Prescott we're coming. Tell him to enjoy his last days of freedom. For a tense moment, it seemed Silas might escalate the confrontation, but something in Yates's steady gaze made him reconsider. With a final venomous look at Zara, he gestured to his companions and stalked out of the store. The silence that followed was broken only by Mr. Hollister's nervous cough. Your supplies are ready, Mr. Remington. Thank you, Yates said, his voice returning to its normal register as he placed coins on the counter. We'll take them now. Outside, The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty street. Zara's heart was still racing from the confrontation, but with the fear came a surprising surge of exhilaration. For the first time since discovering Prescott's betrayal, she felt like she was taking action rather than merely reacting. "You stood your ground in there," Yates observed as they walked back toward the bakery, laden with their purchases. "So did you," she replied, perhaps too firmly. "Won't Silas warn Prescott that we're coming, counting on it," Yates said with a grim smile. "A man who thinks he's being hunted makes mistakes. Besides, now we know for certain that Silas was involved. And these powerful friends in Denver could be bluffing, could be real. Either way, we'll be prepared." He glanced at her with newfound respect. "Are you having second thoughts about this journey? It won't be easy, and now we know there may be more danger than we anticipated." Zara considered the question seriously. The prudent answer would be yes, to stay in Rattlesnake Gulch, perhaps find work as a seamstress or housekeeper, and resign herself to the loss of her inheritance. The safe answer. But something had awakened in her during that confrontation with Silas, a fierce determination that felt like her father's spirit living on through her. "No second thoughts," she said firmly. "I'm going to Denver, with or without you, Mr. Remington." His mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. "Somehow I don't doubt that, Miss Valentine, but it will definitely be with me." As they approached Mrs. Hargrove's bakery, Zara realized with sudden clarity that their pretend engagement had just become far more complicated. What had begun as a convenient fiction to silence mockers in a saloon was now a cover for a dangerous pursuit, and possibly their only protection against whatever waited for them in Denver. "We should discuss our story," she said quietly as they paused outside the bakery. "If we're to continue this charade, we should at least have our details aligned." Yates nodded thoughtfully. "How did we meet?" "Through my father," Zara suggested, thinking quickly. "You worked on our ranch last summer, helping with the cattle drive." "And I've been away since then, working to save money for our future," Yates continued, catching on quickly. "Returned just in time to find you in trouble." "We've been corresponding by letter," Zara added. "That would explain why no one in town knew about our engagement until yesterday." "Good thinking." Yates seemed impressed by her quick mind. "Anything else I should know about my intended bride?" The question, asked lightly, still carried a weight that made Zara pause. "I prefer sunrises to sunsets. I can't abide liars. I make terrible coffee but excellent apple pie. And I've never shot a gun, though my father always meant to teach me." "That last one we'll have to remedy before we reach Denver," Yates said seriously. "As for the rest, I prefer sunsets, value honesty above all else, make decent coffee, and would be honored to taste your pie someday." There was something strangely intimate about this exchange of small truths within their larger fiction. For a moment, Zara could almost imagine what it might be like if their engagement were real, if this steady-eyed man with his quiet strength had actually chosen her, and she him. "We should get some rest," she said, breaking the spell. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Yates tipped his hat, resuming his role as the perfect gentleman. "I'll meet you here at 5. The stage waits for no one." As she watched him walk away, Zara wondered what she had gotten herself into and why, despite all logic and recent experience. She trusted this near stranger more than she had trusted any man since her father died. The stagecoach journey to Denver began in pre-dawn darkness, the eastern sky just beginning to lighten as 6 passengers squeezed into the cramped conveyance. Besides Yates and Zara, there was a drummer selling patent medicines, an elderly couple returning from visiting relatives, and a young minister headed to his first parish. Zara, dressed in her new boots and a practical riding skirt Yates had insisted on purchasing, felt both apprehensive and strangely liberated as Rattlesnake Gulch disappeared behind them. The fiction of their engagement provided a useful shield against unwanted questions, though the elderly woman, Mrs. Osgood, seemed determined to extract every detail of their romance. "And when is the happy day to be?" she inquired after an hour of increasingly personal questions. We haven't set a date yet, Zara replied, the lie coming more easily now. We have matters to settle in Denver first. Don't wait too long, dear, Mrs. Osgood advised with a knowing smile. A handsome man like your Mr. Remington won't stay unclaimed forever. Yates, who had been gazing out the window at the passing landscape, turned with unexpected playfulness. Oh, I'm very much claimed, madam, have been since the moment I laid eyes on her. The conviction in his voice sent an involuntary shiver through Zara. For someone who claimed to be a poor liar, he played his part remarkably well. The journey was arduous. Spring rains had left sections of the road muddy and rutted, forcing them to disembark several times while the driver and Yates helped push the coach free. By nightfall, when they reached the way station where they would spend the night, Zara was exhausted and sore from the constant jostling. The station was little more than a sturdy cabin with separate sleeping quarters for men and women. After a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and cornbread, the passengers retreated to their respective rooms. Zara found herself sharing with Mrs. Osgood, who continued her friendly interrogation until she finally drifted off to sleep. Unable to rest despite her fatigue, Zara slipped outside to get some air. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. She wrapped her shawl tighter against the spring chill and was startled to find Yates already there, smoking a thin cigar as he leaned against the corral fence. Couldn't sleep, he asked, offering her his coat, which she gratefully accepted. Mrs. Osgood snores, Zara explained with a small smile, and my mind won't quiet, thinking about Prescott, about everything. My father, the ranch, how quickly life can change. She gazed up at the stars. A month ago I thought my future was set. Now I'm chasing a swindler across territories with a man I barely know, pretending to be engaged. Yates exhaled a stream of smoke that disappeared into the darkness. Life rarely follows the paths we lay out for it. Is that what happened to you? Your life took an unexpected turn. He was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low, as if the words were being pulled from some deep, reluctant place. I was engaged once, for real. Her name was Charlotte. Her father owned the largest cattle operation in the county. What happened? Zara asked gently. I was working as a deputy marshal. There was a bank robbery in a town called Silverdale. 3 men, armed and desperate. I tracked them to an abandoned mine. He tapped ash from his cigar, his eyes fixed on some point in the darkness. They had a hostage, a young woman. Things went badly. By the time it was over, she was dead, along with 2 of the robbers. I'm sorry, Zara said, sensing there was more to the story. The woman was Charlotte's sister, Yates continued after a moment. She blamed me for not saving her. Said I cared more about catching criminals than protecting innocent lives. Maybe she was right. The weight of his confession hung between them. Zara understood now why he had been so quick to come to her defense in the saloon, why he was helping her pursue Prescott. It wasn't just about justice, it was about redemption. Is that why you gave up being a marshal? She asked. He nodded. Turned in my badge the next day, started tracking people for hire instead. Figured if I was going to hunt men, I should be honest about it being for money, not justice. But that's not why you're helping me, Zara observed. There's no bounty on Prescott. Not yet, Yates agreed with a faint smile, but maybe there should be. They stood in companionable silence for a while, the night sounds of crickets and distant coyotes filling the space between them. We should try to get some sleep, Yates finally said, stubbing out his cigar. Another long day tomorrow. As they walked back toward the station, Zara impulsively touched his arm. Thank you for telling me about Charlotte. You didn't have to. Figured if we're pretending to be engaged, you should know why I'm not actually married, he replied, but his attempt at lightness didn't quite mask the lingering sadness in his eyes. At the door to the women's quarters, he hesitated. There's something else you should know. I sent a wire to the stage office in the next town before we left. Asked them to hold any messages for us. You think Prescott might have sent word ahead, or Sila's, Either way, we need to be prepared. He reached into his coat pocket, the one she was still wearing, and removed a small derringer. Keep this with you, just in case. The weight of the weapon in her hand was unfamiliar and somewhat frightening. I told you, I don't know how to use a gun. Point and pull the trigger, Yates said simply. It's only got 2 shots, so make them count. With that ominous advice, he bid her good night and disappeared into the men's quarters, leaving Zara to wonder what dangers might await them on the road ahead. The second day of their journey was marked by increasing tension. At the midday stop, Yates checked for messages as planned and returned to the coach with a grim expression. Prescott cashed the banker's draft in Denver 3 days ago, he informed Zara quietly as the other passengers stretched their legs. And there's a message waiting for us at the next station. The clerk didn't know who left it. A trap, she asked, her hand instinctively touching the derringer hidden in her pocket. Possibly, or information. Either way, we'll proceed carefully. The next station was a more substantial establishment, a proper inn with a small trading post attached. As the passengers disembarked for a brief rest, Yates approached the station master while Zara lingered nearby, watchful. The sealed envelope the man handed over bore no name, only the words for the couple from Rattlesnake Gulch. Yates opened it with careful fingers, his body angled to shield the contents from prying eyes. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address scrawled in hasty handwriting. 1219 Larimer Street, Denver. Ask for Madame Rosa. She knows where the fox has gone to ground. What does it mean? Zara whispered when he showed her the note. Not sure, Yates admitted, but Larimer Street is in a rough part of Denver, not the kind of place Prescott would stay openly. Then who is Madame Rosa, and who sent this? Someone who knows we're looking for Prescott. Could be a friend, could be an enemy. He folded the note carefully. We'll find out in Denver. The remainder of the journey passed without incident, though Zara caught Yates scanning the horizon more frequently, his hand never far from his holstered revolver. The pretense of their engagement continued, with Yates playing the devoted fiancé so convincingly that even Zara sometimes found herself momentarily forgetting it was an act. They arrived in Denver as the sun was setting on the third day, the city's buildings silhouetted against the fiery sky. After bidding farewell to their fellow passengers, Yates secured rooms at a modest hotel near the stage office adjacent accommodations with a connecting door that he insisted remain unlocked for safety. We'll start our search tomorrow, he said as they shared a simple dinner in the hotel's dining room. First the banks, then this Madame Rosa if necessary. You have contacts here who can help, Zara asked, mindful of Silas's warning about Prescott's powerful friends. A few, Yates acknowledged. Denver's grown since I was last here, but some things don't change. The city has its own rules, its own hierarchies. Knowing who to ask is half the battle. And the other half, knowing who to avoid, he replied grimly. Denver may look civilized compared to Rattlesnake Gulch, but make no mistake, there's more danger here than in any frontier town. With those sobering words, he escorted her to her room, checking it thoroughly before allowing her to retire. Through the connecting door, she could hear him moving about, the sounds oddly comforting in the unfamiliar surroundings. Sleep came fitfully, her dreams haunted by faceless pursuers and the phantom sensation of falling. She woke before dawn to find Denver shrouded in fog, the streets below her window like rivers of mist. Yates was already awake and dressed when she emerged from her room, studying a map of the city spread across the small table. He looked up at her approach, his expression softening momentarily. There are 3 major banks in Denver, he explained, pointing to their locations on the map. We'll start with First National. It's the most likely to have handled a banker's draft from Rattlesnake Gulch. They breakfasted quickly and set out into the city, Zara marveling at the bustle and noise after the relative quiet of Wyoming territory. Denver in 1875 was a city in transformation, part frontier outpost, part aspiring metropolis. Horse-drawn omnibuses shared the streets with carriages and freight wagons, while pedestrians navigated boardwalks crowded with merchants, laborers, and ladies in fashionable dress. At First National Bank, Yates's inquiries met with polite but firm resistance. Without a court order, the manager explained they could not disclose information about customer transactions. But the funds were obtained fraudulently, Zara protested. Surely that changes matters. I sympathize, Miss Valentine, the manager said with practiced regret, but we require official documentation of such allegations before we can assist you. The other banks yielded similar results. By mid-afternoon, Zara's frustration was mounting. This is useless, she muttered as they left the third bank. We're getting nowhere. Not entirely, Yates countered. We confirmed that Prescott did cash the draft here, and the teller at the second bank reacted when I mentioned his name. He knows something. But he wouldn't tell us anything. Not officially. Yates guided her toward a small cafe. But he gets off work at 5. I plan to have a more private conversation with him then. Over coffee and sandwiches, they plotted their next moves. The mysterious address from the note 1219 Larimer Street might be their best lead, but Yates was reluctant to take Zara into that part of town. It's not a place for a respectable woman, he explained. Madame Rosa sounds like she runs a brothel or gambling house. Then I won't go as a respectable woman, Zara declared. I can dress the part if necessary. Yates looked at her with a mixture of surprise and reluctance. It's dangerous. So is letting Prescott escape with my father's money, she countered. Besides, 2 people asking questions are more effective than 1. Their debate was interrupted by a commotion outside the cafe. A crowd had gathered in the street, watching as 2 men argued vehemently, their voices rising with each exchange. That's him, Yates said suddenly, his body tensing. The one in the brown coat, that's Thomas Prescott. Zara's heart lurched painfully. The man who had stolen her future stood less than 50 feet away, handsome in a practiced way, with pomaded hair and an expensive waistcoat. He was gesturing angrily at an older gentleman who appeared unimpressed by his tirade. Stay here, Yates instructed, rising from his seat, but Zara was already moving, propelled by months of grief and anger. She pushed through the crowd just as Prescott turned to leave, coming face to face with the man who had courted her with false promises and honeyed lies. His expression, when he recognized her, was almost comical shock giving way to calculation in the space of a heartbeat. Zara, he said, recovering quickly. What an unexpected pleasure. You're a long way from home, my dear. I'm not your dear, she replied, her voice steady despite the rage coursing through her. And thanks to you, I no longer have a home. Prescott glanced around, noting the interested onlookers. His charming smile slipped into place like a well-worn mask. There seems to be some misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Zara said coldly. You stole my property through fraud. I've come to reclaim it. A serious accusation, Prescott observed, his tone hardening. And entirely without proof, I'm afraid. We have the proof, Yates said, stepping beside Zara. Forged documents don't hold up well to scrutiny, Prescott. Recognition dawned in Prescott's eyes. Remington. Should have known Silas would fail to handle you properly. Your friend tried, Yates acknowledged. Wasn't up to the task. A dangerous smile played across Prescott's lips. Denver isn't Rattlesnake Gulch. You'll find I have considerably more influence here. Is that a threat? Yates asked quietly. A reality, Prescott replied. Miss Valentine signed those documents willingly. If she now regrets our business arrangement, that's hardly my concern. It wasn't a business arrangement, Zara interjected fiercely. It was theft, pure and simple. Prescott stepped closer, lowering his voice. Be careful, Zara. You're out of your depth here. Take your watchdog and go home before things get unpleasant. The only one facing unpleasantness is you, Yates countered. We've notified the authorities in 3 territories about your schemes. It's only a matter of time before they catch up to you. Something flickered in Prescott's eyes, a momentary uncertainty quickly masked. "Believe what you will. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to." As he turned to leave, Zara called after him, "This isn't over, Thomas." He looked back, his handsome face set in lines of contempt. "For you, my dear, it was over the moment you trusted me. A lesson I'd have thought your father's death would have taught you in this world. The only person you can rely on is yourself." The cruel reference to her father felt like a physical blow. Zara stood frozen as Prescott disappeared into the crowd, his words echoing painfully in her mind. Yates's hand on her arm brought her back to the present. "Are you all right?" "No," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "But I will be when I get my ranch back." "He's rattled," Yates observed. "Didn't expect us to track him here so quickly." "What now?" "Now we follow him," Yates said simply. "At a distance. Let's see where Denver's newest businessman conducts his affairs." They trailed Prescott through the busy streets, staying far enough back to avoid detection. He led them to an imposing building on 16th Street, the First Bank of Colorado, a much grander establishment than the ones they had visited earlier. "He's making a withdrawal," Yates surmised as they watched from across the street. "Probably planning to leave town now that we've found him." "Then we don't have much time," Zara realized. "We need to stop him before he disappears again." When Prescott emerged from the bank, his confident stride suggested a man without concerns. He hailed a hansom cab and departed, leaving Yates and Zara to secure transportation of their own. Their pursuit led them to a fashionable neighborhood near Denver's Capitol Hill, where Prescott entered an elegant brownstone with a carved oak door. "Now we know where he's staying," Yates said as they observed from a discreet distance. "But we still need evidence of his fraud to take to the authorities. And that evidence is likely inside that house," Zara concluded. "With him, getting it won't be easy." "Then perhaps it's time to visit Madame Rosa," Zara suggested. "If she knows where the fox has gone to ground, she might know more about his business here." Yates hesitated, clearly torn between pursuing Prescott directly and following their mysterious lead. "You're right," he finally conceded, "but we go together, and you stay close to me at all times." As dusk fell over Denver, they made their way to Larimer Street, the respectable facade of the city giving way to a rougher, more vibrant district. Saloons and dance halls spilled light and music onto the streets, while painted ladies called invitations from balconies. 1219 Larimer Street proved to be a three-story building with red velvet curtains visible through the windows and a discreet brass plaque that read simply, "Rosa's." A burly doorman eyed them suspiciously as they approached. "We're here to see Madame Rosa," Yates stated, his hand resting protectively at Zara's waist. "We received a message." "Name," the doorman growled. "The couple from Rattlesnake Gulch," Zara supplied, echoing the note's wording. The man's demeanor shifted subtly. "Wait here." He disappeared inside, returning moments later with a different expression. "Follow me." They were led through a plush parlor where gentlemen in expensive suits socialized with elegantly dressed women, past a green baize door where the sounds of gambling emanated, and up a curving staircase to a private sitting room on the third floor. Madame Rosa was not what Zara had expected. Instead of the bejeweled madam of her imagination, she found a slim, silver-haired woman in a severe black dress, with intelligent eyes that assessed them thoroughly as they entered. "So," she said in a voice that carried the faint trace of a French accent, "you are the ones hunting Thomas Prescott." "You know him," Yates observed. "I know all men of his kind," Rosa replied with a dismissive wave. "Charming predators who take what isn't theirs." "You sent us the note," Zara guessed, "not I. A friend who shares my dislike of Mr. Prescott." Rosa gestured for them to sit. "Please be comfortable. We have much to discuss." As they settled into velvet upholstered chairs, Zara found herself wondering who in this city could simultaneously know their business and have reason to help them. "Why are you helping us?" she asked directly. Rosa's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile. Let us say that Mr. Prescott made promises to one of my girls, promises he had no intention of keeping. She was young, vulnerable like many who fall prey to his particular charm. What happened to her? Yates asked. When she discovered his true nature, she took her own life. Rosa's voice remained steady, but her eyes hardened. I do not forgive such things. The stark revelation hung in the air. Zara felt a renewed surge of anger toward Prescott, whose trail of destruction extended far beyond her own losses. We need evidence of his fraudulent activities, Yates explained. Something concrete we can take to the authorities. Evidence I cannot provide directly, Rosa replied, but information that I have in abundance. She reached for a small bell on the table beside her and rang it once. Mr. Prescott has indeed established himself in Denver's business circles. He has opened an import company with offices on 16th Street using funds he has acquired from various sources. Including my father's money, Zara interjected, precisely. But his true business is less legitimate. He identifies wealthy women widows, spinsters with inheritances, and systematically defrauds them through false marriage proposals or business partnerships. A young woman entered the room carrying a tray with a decanter and glasses. As she set it down, Rosa spoke to her in low tones. The girl nodded and left quickly. Prescott has a partner here in Denver, Rosa continued, pouring amber liquid into 3 glasses. A lawyer named Edwin Caldwell who provides the legal framework for his schemes. Caldwell prepares the documents, Prescott obtains the signatures through manipulation or forgery. Where can we find this Caldwell? Yates asked, accepting the offered drink. His offices are on Lawrence Street, Rosa replied, but you will not find him cooperative. He has too much to lose. Then what do you suggest? Zara asked, leaving her own glass untouched. Rosa's expression became calculating. Mr. Prescott keeps records of his transactions, a ledger that details his conquests and their value. My sources tell me this book is kept in his home office. The brownstone on Capitol Hill, Yates concluded. Indeed. He lives there with his latest target, a wealthy widow named Mrs. Eleanor Penfield, whose late husband owned half the silver mines in Colorado. Another victim, Zara murmured. Not yet, Rosa corrected. He is still in the courtship phase, but soon, I fear, she will join the ranks of the dispossessed. Unless we stop him first, Yates stated firmly. Rosa nodded. My thoughts exactly, which is why I have arranged for you to attend Mrs. Penfield's soirée tomorrow evening. Her what? Zara asked, startled. A social gathering. She hosts them regularly for Denver's elite. Mr. Prescott will be there, as will many of his business associates. Rosa reached into a drawer and withdrew 2 engraved invitations. You will attend as Mr. and Mrs. Yates Remington, recently arrived from San Francisco with interests in railroad investments. Yates raised an eyebrow. You've thought this through. I have survived in this city for 20 years by thinking everything through, Mr. Remington. Rosa handed them the invitations. The event begins at 8. Formal attire is expected. I don't have anything suitable, Zara realized with dismay. That has been arranged as well, Rosa assured her. A dress will be delivered to your hotel tomorrow morning. Your engagement provides the perfect cover for your presence. As they prepared to leave, Zara couldn't help asking the question that had been nagging at her. Why go to such lengths to help us? Is revenge for your girl the only reason? Rosa studied her for a long moment. Perhaps I see in you something of myself at your age, Miss Valentine, too trusting, too willing to believe in the goodness of others. The world cures us of such notions eventually, but the process is painful. She glanced at Yates. Or perhaps I simply believe that occasionally justice should prevail over those who prey on the vulnerable. It wasn't until they were back on the street, the sounds of Larimer Street's nightlife swirling around them, that Zara fully processed what had just transpired. We're going to a society party, she said incredulously, to steal a ledger from a man who stole my ranch. Poetic justice, Yates remarked with the ghost of a smile. though I suspect the evening will be more complicated than Rosa made it sound. Do you trust her?" He considered the question seriously. "Not entirely, but her hatred of Prescott seems genuine, and for now, our interests align with hers." As they made their way back to their hotel, Zara found herself both excited and terrified by the prospect of the coming evening. They were no longer merely pursuing Prescott, they were actively conspiring to expose him, potentially in front of Denver's social elite. "What if we're recognized?" she asked as they reached the hotel. "Prescott has already seen us in the city. He'll be expecting us to approach the authorities or confront him directly," Yates reasoned. "Not to appear at a social gathering as respectable investors. Besides," he added with unexpected warmth, "I think you'll find that people see what they expect to see. Mrs. Remington from San Francisco will look very different from Miss Valentine of Rattlesnake Gulch." The certainty in his voice gave her courage. As they parted at their respective doors, Yates paused, his expression unusually gentle. "Whatever happens tomorrow night, remember that you're not alone in this," he said quietly. "We'll face it together." The simple promise meant more to Zara than elaborate declarations of protection ever could. For the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel alone against the world, and the sensation was as unfamiliar as it was comforting. Morning brought a large box delivered to Zara's room. Inside was an evening gown of deep emerald silk with a modestly cut bodice and fashionable bustle, accompanied by matching gloves, shoes, and a small reticule. A note in elegant handwriting read simply, "For Mrs. Remington, Rosa." Yates whistled softly when he saw the gown laid out on Zara's bed. "Rosa doesn't do things by half measures. I've never worn anything so fine," Zara admitted, running her fingers over the luxurious fabric. "My father believed in practical clothing." "You'll outshine every woman there," Yates said with such matter-of-fact certainty that Zara felt a blush rising to her cheeks. "And what about you?" she asked, changing the subject. "Do you have appropriate attire for a society function?" "Rosa thought of that too," he replied, gesturing to his own package. "Evening clothes delivered this morning. Seems our benefactress has considered every detail." They spent the day planning their approach to the evening ahead. If Prescott's ledger was indeed in his study at the brownstone, one of them would need to slip away from the party to find it. "I should be the one to look," Zara insisted. "A woman exploring the house will raise fewer suspicions than a man." "And if you're caught," Yates countered. "I'll claim to be looking for the lady's retiring room," she replied. "Besides, you need to keep Prescott occupied, ensure he doesn't come looking for me." Though clearly reluctant, Yates eventually agreed to her plan. "But at the first sign of trouble, we leave with or without the ledger." As evening approached, Zara found herself both anticipating and dreading the transformation required of her. The elegant Mrs. Remington seemed as fictional as her engagement, a sophisticated creature, far removed from the ranch girl of Wyoming territory. A knock at the connecting door preceded Yates's entrance. He had already changed into his evening attire: black tailcoat, white waistcoat, and pristinely tied cravat. The formal clothes accentuated his height and the breadth of his shoulders, transforming the rugged bounty hunter into something closer to the railroad investor he was pretending to be. "You look—" Zara began, then faltered, unable to find a word that wouldn't reveal too much of her unexpected reaction. "Uncomfortable," Yates supplied with a wry smile. "Like a grizzly bear stuffed into a Sunday suit." "I was going to say distinguished," she corrected, smiling despite her nerves. "Distinguished," he repeated thoughtfully. "Never been called that before. I'll take it as a compliment." It was meant as one. Zara gathered the gown and accessories. "I should get ready. Mrs. Penfield's soiree awaits." "I'll arrange for a carriage," Yates said, moving toward the door. He paused, his expression suddenly serious. "Be careful tonight, Zara. Prescott is dangerous, especially now that he knows we're in Denver." The use of her first name, rare from his usually formal lips, underscored the gravity of his concern. "I will," she promised. "We both will." Alone with the emerald gown, Zara confronted the practical challenge of dressing without assistance. The fashion of 1875 required corsets and layers that were difficult to manage alone, but she was determined to make it work. By the time she had wrestled herself into the various undergarments and finally the gown itself, she was flushed with exertion. The woman who stared back from the mirror was almost unrecognizable. The gown's color brought out the golden flecks in her hazel eyes, while the cut emphasized her narrow waist and the gentle curve of her shoulders. She had arranged her dark hair in a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck, with a few artful tendrils framing her face. Yates's sharp intake of breath when she emerged from her room told her the transformation was complete. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, an expression in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. "You look beautiful," he said finally, the words simple but sincere. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his gaze. "Though I feel rather like I'm playing a part in a theatrical production." "Then we'll play our parts together," he said, offering his arm. "Mrs. Remington." "Mr. Remington," she returned, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. The carriage ride to Mrs. Penfield's mansion was a journey into another world. Capitol Hill in the evening was illuminated by gas lamps that cast a golden glow over the stately homes of Denver's wealthy elite. Carriages lined the circular drive of a magnificent three-story residence with white columns and tall windows blazing with light. As they joined the procession of guests making their way up the marble steps, Zara felt a momentary panic. What if someone recognizes us? "Remember," Yates murmured close to her ear, "we're investors from San Francisco, recently engaged. Your father made his fortune in shipping, mine in lumber. We've known each other since childhood." The fabricated background steadied her. By the time they reached the receiving line, Zara had fully embraced the role of Mrs. Remington-to-be, greeting their hostess with practiced composure. Eleanor Penfield was a handsome woman in her 40s, with auburn hair artfully arranged to conceal the first strands of gray. Her welcoming smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she accepted their introduction. "San Francisco," she repeated. "How interesting. I don't believe we've met before, Mr. Remington." "My first visit to Denver," Yates replied smoothly. "Though my fiancé has been singing its praises since we left California." "The city is indeed flourishing," Mrs. Penfield agreed. "You must meet my own fiancé, Mr. Prescott. He has extensive knowledge of investment opportunities in the region." Zara's fingers tightened involuntarily on Yates's arm at the mention of Prescott's name. He covered her hand with his own, a subtle gesture of reassurance. "We would be delighted," he replied with perfect composure. "Perhaps later in the evening." As they moved into the crowded ballroom, Zara whispered, "She's engaged to him already. We may be too late." "Not yet," Yates murmured back. "Rosa said they were still in the courtship phase. If they're engaged, it's recent, which means she hasn't signed anything yet." They circulated through the room, accepting glasses of champagne from passing footmen and exchanging pleasantries with Denver's elite. Yates played his role with surprising skill, discussing railroad expansions and mining ventures with the ease of someone familiar with both. "You're very convincing," Zara observed during a momentary lull in conversations. "Have you done this before? Tracking men like Prescott sometimes requires creative approaches," he admitted. "Though usually I'm posing as someone less respectable than a railroad investor." Their banter was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas Prescott himself, resplendent in evening clothes that emphasized his trim figure and classic good looks. He approached with Mrs. Penfield on his arm, his expression betraying no recognition as he was introduced to Mr. and Mrs. Remington from San Francisco. "A pleasure," he said, shaking Yates's hand firmly. "Eleanor tells me you're interested in our local opportunities." "Indeed," Yates replied with admirable restraint. "Denver seems ripe with potential." "You have no idea," Prescott agreed, his gaze sliding to Zara. "And what brings such a lovely young woman to our frontier city?" Surely San Francisco offers more refined entertainments. I go where my fiancé's business takes him, Zara replied sweetly. Besides, I find the West invigorating, so much unexplored territory. The double meaning wasn't lost on Prescott, whose smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Then you must allow me to show you both the city's attractions during your stay, perhaps tomorrow afternoon. Unfortunately, we have prior engagements, Yates interjected smoothly. But another time, perhaps. As the orchestra struck up a waltz, Prescott turned to his fiancée. Shall we, my dear? Mrs. Penfield beamed up at him with naked adoration that made Zara's stomach twist with recognition. She had worn that same expression when Prescott had courted her. He hasn't changed his methods at all, she murmured as the couple moved toward the dance floor. Same charm, same false devotion. Men like Prescott don't change, Yates observed grimly. They just find new hunting grounds. He offered his hand. Shall we dance? It will give us a better view of the room and the exits. Zara hesitated. I should warn you, I'm not particularly accomplished at waltzing. Fortunately, I am, Yates replied with unexpected lightness. My mother insisted all her children learn, said it was the mark of a gentleman. His hand at her waist was steady as he guided her into the swirling mass of dancers. Zara had danced before at local gatherings in Wyoming territory, but never like this, never with a partner whose movements were so assured, whose lead was so easy to follow. You surprise me, Mr. Remington, she said as they turned gracefully around the floor. A bounty hunter who waltzes. I contain multitudes, he replied with the hint of a smile. Then, more seriously, the study is likely on the second floor. Most of these mansions follow similar layouts. We'll need to time your exploration carefully. As they danced, Yates subtly guided them closer to the grand staircase visible through the ballroom doors. There, he murmured. Servants are using the back stairs, guests are staying on this level. The second floor should be relatively unguarded. The music ended, and couples applauded politely before new partnerships formed for the next dance. Yates led Zara to the edge of the room, near a refreshment table laden with elaborate delicacies. This may be our best opportunity, he said quietly. I'll create a distraction to draw attention away from the stairs. Give me 2 minutes, then make your move. What kind of distraction? Zara asked warily. Nothing too dramatic, he assured her, just enough to ensure all eyes are elsewhere. Before she could question him further, he was gone, moving purposefully through the crowd toward the far side of the ballroom. Zara watched the ornate clock on the mantelpiece, counting the seconds anxiously. At precisely the 2-minute mark, a commotion erupted near the French doors leading to the terrace. A young man, clearly in his cups, had stumbled against a server, sending a tray of champagne glasses crashing to the floor. As guests turned toward the disturbance, Zara noticed Yates nearby, ostensibly helping to calm the situation while actually ensuring it commanded maximum attention. Seizing her moment, she slipped from the ballroom and ascended the carpeted staircase with measured steps, as if she belonged there. The upper floor was dimly lit and blessedly empty, with several doors leading off a central hallway. Logic suggested the master suite would be at the front of the house, with the best views of the city. If Prescott was staying here as Rosa had implied, his study or private room would likely be nearby. The first door she tried opened onto an elegantly appointed guest bedroom, undisturbed and clearly unoccupied. The second revealed a similar scene. The third, however, showed signs of masculine habitation, a silver-backed hairbrush on the dresser, a half-empty decanter of brandy, and a leather portfolio on a writing desk. Heart pounding, Zara slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The portfolio yielded nothing of interest, just correspondence about shipments and invoices for Prescott's import business. A quick search of the desk drawers revealed only the usual accoutrements of a gentleman's writing desk. Growing desperate, she surveyed the room more carefully. There a small safe tucked into the corner, partially hidden by a decorative screen. It was locked, of course, but something about its placement struck her as odd. It seemed almost performative, as if meant to draw attention. On impulse, she checked beneath the bed and behind the curtains, finding nothing. The wardrobe contained only clothing and valises. As she was about to admit defeat, her eye caught on a loose section of wallpaper near the baseboard, almost imperceptible, unless one was looking for irregularities. Kneeling, she pressed gently and felt the section give way, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside was a slim leather-bound book with no title or markings on its cover. With trembling fingers, Zara opened it to find page after page of names, dates, and figures, women's names, followed by notations about their property and worth. Her own name was there, on one of the most recent pages. Zara Valentine, Rattlesnake Gulch, Wyoming Territory. Ranch valued at $5,000. Liquid assets, $2,100. Status, acquired. The cold-blooded assessment of her value made her feel physically ill, but it was the final page that truly chilled her blood. Eleanor Penfield, Denver. Properties in Denver and Central City. Mining interests valued at $75,000. Liquid assets, estimated $30,000. Status, engagement secured, transfer of assets pending. Prescott was preparing to do to Mrs. Penfield exactly what he had done to Zara and doubtless many others before her. The evidence was incontrovertible and now in her hands. Tucking the ledger into her reticule, Zara quickly restored the hidden compartment and rose to leave. As she reached for the door handle, voices in the hallway froze her in place. "I left some papers in my room," Prescott's unmistakable voice said. "Won't be a moment, darling." "Hurry back," Mrs. Penfield replied. "The Hendersons are asking about our wedding plans." Footsteps approached the door. Zara looked frantically around the room for hiding places. The wardrobe was too obvious, under the bed too exposed if he dropped something. The window, it was her only option. She rushed to it, relieved to find it opened onto a small balcony. Slipping outside just as the door handle turned, she pressed herself against the wall, praying the darkness would conceal her. Through the glass, she could see Prescott enter the room, moving directly to the hidden compartment she had just accessed. His expression changed from confidence to alarm as he discovered the ledger missing. He searched frantically around the room, lifting pillows and checking drawers. Zara held her breath, the night air cool against her flushed skin. The ledger in her reticule felt as though it weighed 100 pounds if Prescott thought to check the balcony, but he didn't. After a final frustrated survey of the room, he straightened his clothing and composure before exiting, closing the door firmly behind him. Zara waited for a full minute before daring to re-enter the room. The hallway was clear when she peered out, and she made her way back to the staircase with her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Yates was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, his expression carefully neutral though his eyes betrayed his concern. "Did you find anything?" he asked quietly as she reached him. "Everything," she whispered, patting her reticule. His complete record of victims, including Mrs. Penfield, relief flooded his features. "Then we need to leave, now, before he discovers it's missing." "Too late," Zara murmured, nodding toward the ballroom entrance where Prescott stood scanning the crowd with barely concealed agitation. "He already knows. Stay calm," Yates advised, taking her arm. "We'll make our excuses to Mrs. Penfield and depart as naturally as possible." But as they moved toward their hostess, Prescott's gaze landed on them. Recognition and fury transformed his handsome face into something almost feral. He started toward them with purposeful strides. "Change of plan," Yates said tersely. "Side door now." They quickened their pace, no longer concerned with appearances. Prescott was closing the distance between them, his hand reaching inside his jacket where a weapon might be concealed. The side entrance led to a smaller hallway and eventually the kitchens, where staff were bustling with platters and champagne bottles. Yates and Zara pushed through, ignoring the startled exclamations of servants. "Where are we going?" Zara gasped as they emerged into the cool night air at the rear of the mansion. "Away from here," Yates replied grimly. "Prescott won't make a scene inside, but once he's outside," a shout from behind them confirmed his assessment. Prescott had followed them into the garden, propriety abandoned in his determination to recover the incriminating ledger. "Stop," he commanded. "That book belongs to me, like my ranch belonged to you," Zara shot back, her fear giving way to righteous anger. "Or Mrs. Penfield's mines." Prescott's hand emerged from his jacket holding a small pistol. "I won't ask again. Return what you've stolen, or I'll be forced to take more permanent measures." Yates shifted, placing himself between Zara and the weapon. "Put it down, Prescott. You can't shoot us both, and you're not leaving here with that ledger." "I don't need to shoot you both," Prescott replied coldly. "Just her. You're a practical man, Remington. Is her life worth a book of business records?" The moment stretched between them, taut with deadly possibility. Then, unexpectedly, the garden gate opened, spilling light across the darkened lawn. Marshal James Burton of the Denver Police stood there, flanked by 2 deputies. "Lower your weapon, Prescott," he ordered, "unless you want to add attempted murder to your charges." Prescott's face contorted with fury and disbelief. "What charges? I've broken no laws. Fraud, forgery, and theft would be a start," Burton replied evenly. "We've been watching you for some time, just waiting for the evidence to surface." He nodded toward Zara's reticule. "Which I believe the lady is carrying." Yates smiled grimly. "You got my message. Just in time, it seems," the marshal confirmed. "Madame Rosa was most insistent that we arrive precisely at 10 o'clock. Rosa, of course." Zara suddenly understood the older woman's elaborate planning. She hadn't just been helping them expose Prescott. She had been setting a trap with the Denver law as willing participants. As the deputies disarmed and restrained a protesting Prescott, Marshal Burton approached Zara. "That ledger, miss, if you don't mind. It's evidence now." With a strange reluctance, Zara handed over the small book that contained proof of her own humiliation alongside that of countless other women. "What happens now, Mr. Prescott will face charges here in Denver," Burton explained. "And I imagine there will be warrants from other jurisdictions once word spreads of his arrest. As for your property," he glanced at Yates, "Jim here tells me you have copies of the fraudulent documents at our hotel," Yates confirmed, "along with the genuine deed that Prescott altered." "Bring them to my office tomorrow," Burton instructed. "We'll start the process of restoring your ownership." As Prescott was led away, still protesting his innocence and threatening retribution, Zara felt a curious hollowness where triumph should have been. Justice was being served, her ranch would be returned to her, and yet, "Are you all right?" Yates asked softly, noticing her expression. "I thought I would feel different," she admitted, "more victorious." "Justice doesn't always feel the way we expect," he replied, "but it's still justice." They watched in silence as the lawmen disappeared with their prisoner, leaving them alone in the moonlit garden. The sounds of the soiree continued from within the mansion, the guests unaware of the drama that had unfolded just beyond their champagne glasses and idle chatter. "We should tell Mrs. Penfield," Zara said suddenly. "She deserves to know what kind of man she almost married." Yates nodded in agreement. "It won't be easy for her to hear." "No," Zara agreed, thinking of her own devastation when she discovered Prescott's true nature. "But better now than after he's taken everything." They re-entered the mansion through the kitchen, straightening their clothing and composing themselves before returning to the ballroom. Mrs. Penfield was standing near the orchestra, glancing around with increasing concern at her fiancé's prolonged absence. "Mrs. Penfield," Zara approached her with gentle determination, "might we speak with you privately? It's a matter of some urgency." The older woman's brow furrowed with confusion. "Has something happened to Thomas?" "Yes," Yates replied simply, "and you need to know about it before others tell you their version of events." Curiosity and concern warred on Alina Penfield's face before she nodded, leading them to a small sitting room adjacent to the ballroom. What is this about, Mr. Remington? Not about Mr. Remington, Zara interjected softly. About me. My name is not Mrs. Remington, it's Zara Valentine from Rattlesnake Gulch in Wyoming Territory. And several months ago, I was engaged to Thomas Prescott, just as you are now. Mrs. Penfield's face paled. I don't understand. He swindled me, Zara continued, her voice steady despite the pain of revisiting her humiliation. Claimed to love me, proposed marriage, then forged documents to steal my father's ranch and all our savings before disappearing. This is preposterous, Mrs. Penfield protested, though uncertainty had crept into her voice. Thomas is a respected businessman. He's a con man, Yates stated bluntly, and you're his latest target. He's been arrested tonight, Mrs. Penfield. The Denver police have evidence of his schemes against multiple women across 3 territories. The widow's composure crumbled as the truth of their words registered in her expression. No, she whispered. It can't be. He loves me. We're to be married next month. Zara's heart ached for this proud woman facing the same bitter realization she herself had endured. I'm truly sorry, she said gently. I know how painful this is to hear. Mrs. Penfield drew herself up, dignity reasserting itself through her shock. If what you say is true, I owe you my gratitude for preventing what would have been a terrible mistake. You might be asked to testify against him, Yates warned. The marshal will likely contact you tomorrow. Then I shall cooperate fully, Mrs. Penfield declared with newfound resolve. No one makes a fool of Alina Penfield and escapes the consequences. As they took their leave, promising to return the next day with more details, Zara felt a growing sense of closure. The wound Prescott had inflicted was beginning to heal not through vengeance, but through preventing others from suffering as she had. Outside, the night had grown cooler, stars pricking the dark canopy above Denver's gaslit streets. Yates secured a carriage to return them to their hotel, both of them silent with the weight of the evening's events. It's really over, Zara said finally as the carriage rattled through the quiet streets. I'll get my ranch back. Prescott will face justice. Yes, Yates agreed, studying her in the dim interior of the carriage. You'll return to Wyoming with your property restored. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. And you, what will you do now? Continue my work, I suppose, he replied, echoing their earlier conversation. There are always men like Prescott who need finding. The prospect of returning to her solitary existence on the ranch suddenly seemed less appealing than it had before. The past days with Yates, despite the danger and uncertainty, had awakened something in her that had been dormant since her father's death, a sense of connection, of not facing the world entirely alone. You could. She began, then faltered, unsure how to express what she was feeling. Could what? He prompted gently. Visit, she finished lamely. When you're in Wyoming territory, the ranch has plenty of room. Yates was quiet for so long that Zara feared she had overstepped. When he finally spoke, his voice held an unfamiliar hesitancy. Would that be as a friend, or as something else? The question hung between them, laden with possibilities neither had acknowledged until this moment. Their pretend engagement, created as a shield against mockery, and then maintained as a cover for their investigation, had somehow evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. I don't know, Zara admitted honestly. I only know that the thought of never seeing you again feels wrong. Yates reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. Then perhaps we should give ourselves time to figure it out. How much time? She asked, her heart quickening at his touch. As much as we need, he replied. The ranch will keep, and there are other swindlers to catch. Are you suggesting I join you in your work? Zara asked, surprised. You've proven yourself quite capable, he pointed out with a hint of a smile. And 2 heads are better than 1 when tracking men like Prescott. The carriage arrived at their hotel before she could respond. As Yates helped her down, his hand lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. In the lamplight, his eyes held a warmth she had glimpsed only rarely before. We don't have to decide tonight, he said softly. But know this: our engagement may have been pretense, but my regard for you is entirely genuine. The simple declaration, delivered without flourish or expectation, touched Zara more deeply than any elaborate profession of love could have. This man, who had stood tall in a saloon and declared her his future wife to silence her mockers, had somehow become essential to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. "As is mine for you," she replied, the words feeling both terrifying and inevitable. They stood there in the quiet street, no longer pretending, no longer pursuing justice or vengeance, just two people acknowledging the unexpected connection that had grown between them amid danger and deception. "So what now?" Zara asked, reluctant to end the moment but aware of the lateness of the hour. "Now we rest," Yates said practically. "Tomorrow we meet with Marshal Burton, formalize your claim to the ranch, and then—" He smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "Then we decide what adventure comes next." "Together," Zara added, the word both a question and an affirmation. "Together," he agreed, sealing the promise with a gentle kiss that held the whispered possibility of all that might follow. 3 months later, the Wyoming Territory summer was in full bloom as Zara stood on the porch of the Valentine Ranch house, watching a familiar rider approach through the golden afternoon light. Her heart quickened at the sight of Yates Remington's tall figure astride his chestnut gelding, returning from his latest assignment. The ranch was flourishing under her care, with help from the hands she'd hired after reclaiming her property. The legal proceedings against Thomas Prescott had concluded with his conviction in Denver and pending charges in 2 other territories. Justice had been served, and life had moved forward. Yates dismounted with the easy grace she had come to anticipate, his smile warming as he approached the porch. "Miss Valentine," he greeted her, tipping his hat with playful formality. "Mr. Remington," she returned, unable to suppress her own smile. "Successful journey, very," he confirmed, climbing the steps to join her. "Apprehended 2 brothers wanted for stage robbery near Laramie. And I have news from Denver." "Oh," Zara raised an eyebrow, curious. "Mrs. Penfield has established a foundation to assist women who have been victims of fraud," he explained. "She's named it after Rosa's girl who took her own life, quite a turnaround for a society matron." "Sometimes the worst experiences bring out unexpected strength in people," Zara observed, thinking of her own journey from devastated victim to a woman who had helped bring a predator to justice. "Speaking of strength," Yates said, reaching into his saddlebag, "I brought you something." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a marshal's badge, not the official star of a U.S. Marshal, but a specially commissioned emblem bearing the words "Special Deputy, Wyoming Territory." "Marshal Gardner approved your appointment this morning," Yates explained, his expression both proud and slightly anxious. "If you still want to join me in tracking down men like Prescott, that is." Zara traced the badge with wondering fingers. "I do," she said simply. "Though the ranch will be well tended by your foreman while we're away," Yates finished for her, "and will always be here to return to." The past 3 months had seen a gradual transformation in their relationship. Yates had stayed to help her restore the ranch after their return from Denver, his initial 2-week visit extending as they discovered they worked well together. When he resumed taking bounty assignments, he returned to the ranch between jobs, each reunion sweeter than the last. Their pretend engagement had never been officially ended, nor had it been formalized into anything real. They existed in a space of their own, making more than friends, partners in work and increasingly in life, with the promise of something deeper growing between them. "There's something else," Yates said, his voice taking on an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "Something I've been meaning to ask you." Zara's pulse quickened. "Yes," he took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "When I stood in that saloon and called you my future wife, it was to stop their laughter and protect your dignity. I never imagined then that I would come to wish those words were true. Zara's breath caught in her throat as he continued. I'm not offering you the empty promises Prescott made, Yates said earnestly. Just the truth of who I am, a man who has found something he never thought to find again, a chance at happiness with you. Are you proposing, Mr. Remington? Zara asked softly, her eyes searching his. Inelegantly, perhaps, he admitted with a rueful smile, but sincerely. Zara Valentine, would you consider making our convenient fiction into a permanent reality? Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and unexpected. I would consider it, she replied, her tone deliberately measured though her eyes betrayed her happiness. Under certain conditions. Name them, he said immediately. That we continue our work together as equals, that this ranch remains our home between adventures. And that you kiss me properly right now to seal the agreement. Yates laughed, the sound rich with relief and pleasure. Those are terms I can happily accept, he declared, pulling her gently into his arms. As their lips met in a kiss that held both promise and passion, Zara reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. From tears in a saloon to justice in Denver, from pretense to truth, a path neither of them could have foreseen, leading to a future they would build together. When they finally parted, Yates rested his forehead against hers. So, Mrs. Remington, to be for real this time, what adventure shall we undertake next? First, a wedding, Zara decided with newfound certainty. Then perhaps we should visit Mrs. Penfield's foundation in Denver. I hear there are other swindlers operating in Colorado who need to be brought to justice. A honeymoon of hunting criminals, Yates observed with amusement. You are a most unusual bride. And you are a most unusual groom, she countered, contentment settling deep in her soul. I believe that's why we suit each other so well. As the sun set over the Wyoming plains, casting long shadows across the land her father had loved, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she had found something more precious than the ranch she had fought to reclaim, a partner who saw her strength rather than her vulnerability, who valued her mind as well as her heart. The tears shed in that saloon months ago had led, through an unlikely path, to the greatest joy she had ever known. And as Yates pulled her close for another kiss, Zara silently thanked the twist of fate that had brought this solemn-eyed stranger to her defense on the worst night of her life, the night he had stood tall and called her his future wife. Now, with the badge of their shared purpose in her hand and the promise of their shared future in her heart, Zara Valentine embraced the unexpected life that awaited them, both a life of justice and adventure, challenges and rewards, bound together by a love that had begun as pretense, but had become the most real thing either of them had ever known.